keep it pretty casual, okay? And I will definitely, maybe with about 20 minutes left or so, you know, look to questions from anybody based on what was talked about. But I think we're all cool with if somebody wants to raise their hand or ask a question while we go.
Yeah,
sure,
I think
go.
that's fine too. So please, you know, just attract our attention because there may be a point that you'd like to find out a little bit more about. And, my name is Paul Brown, and my connection is twofold. I'm a political reporter for Time Warner Cable News here in Austin, and I host a political talk show called Capitol Tonight, and so we deal with a lot of statewide political issues, and obviously voter turnout is a very important one. And then I've also, as a student at UT in graduate studies, worked on the Voces project here with Maggie Rivas-Rodriguez, doing some oral history project from World War II veterans, Latino veterans, and so it was great to be invited to take part in this. And I got to hear that Mrs. Castro was going to already be on the panel, and so I said, well, of course I'm going to do that. So we'll introduce her in a second, but I also took the opportunity to bug some friends to invite them as part of the panel because we wanted to get people that we felt were in the trenches when it comes to seeking people to go to the polls, right? And each person here has somewhat of opportunity to share maybe their experiences when it comes to getting out the vote and on the very specific topic of Latino turnout. So I'll start on my far end here. Manny Garcia is a Deputy Executive Director for the Texas Democratic Party. He serves as the party's primary spokesperson and leads the party's messaging efforts. He is in charge of developing, amplifying, and coordinating the voice of Democrats across the state. Previously served as the PDP's Communications Director. That's how I know him pretty well. You know, I also found out that he's a doctoral student currently here at UT, which I'm ad-libbing that part here. He also led communications for Senator Van de Pute's campaign for lieutenant governor in 2014, and of course has been involved in the trenches. So, Manny, it's good to have you here. Next to Manny, as Temo would put it, our token Republican, Artemio Temo Munoz. Has been called by the Wall Street Journal part salesman for the GOP and part agitator within it, to give you an idea of his point of view. He was the chief strategist behind the first ever election of an Hispanic Republican state representative in the Houston area in 2014. He currently attends South Texas College of Law and recently joined Jeb Bush's National Hispanic Leadership Team for his 2016 presidential bid. So we're glad to have Temo here with us. Then next to him, somebody who I interviewed not that long ago, Vincent Harding. He is a native Texan who was raised in Houston as well, down in the Houston area, resides of course here in Austin, and is the youngest and only the second African-American elected chair of the Travis County Democratic Party. He studied law at the University of Texas here in Austin and practices law and has served on a number of boards and commissions in Travis County. So Vince, great to have you here as well. And he's been very involved in outreach, particularly for minority votes here during the Obama campaign. So we'll be interested in hearing some of that from Vince. And then, of course, next to me, Maria de Rosario, Rosie Castro. Mrs. Castro, it's so good to have you here, a native of San Antonio, very active in the Chicano civil rights movement in Texas, and in, of course, the political life in San Antonio for more than 50 years. And she's retired as the interim dean of student success from Palo Alto College. And yes, she is the mother of District 20 Congressman Joaquin Castro and U.S. HUD Secretary Julian Castro, the former San Antonio mayor. Way to go, Mom. Nice job with that. It's so great to have all of you here. And I told Mrs. Castro I'm going to save her for last on the conversation and have our other invited guests kind of jump in first here. And I'm just going to start off. I was going to wet our whistle with something that I read just recently in the LA Times. And this is what it said. I'm quoting part of the article. It said, in the 2014 midterm election, only 27% of eligible Latinos voted, compared with 46% of whites and 41% of African Americans, this according to the U.S. Census data. While the Latino vote is big and growing, 40 million Latinos will be eligible to vote in 2030, up from about 25 million in 2014. It's nowhere near as big as it could be, is what the article states. Manny, you represent the Texas Democratic Party here. Before I get to strategy and all of that, I mean, all of you guys have been mobilized to the polls, clearly. What got you involved in politics and, got you to that first voting booth?
Yeah. Well, so I got involved through politics through policy. I mean, basically, I had one teacher that was an amazing teacher for us and kind of changed our lives. I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. I grew up in Bronzeville, Texas. I think all of us have this story of an amazing teacher or someone in our lives that sort of exposed us out to the world and let us all kind of what was going on. So I got active through there. And when I came to the University of Texas at Austin, when I was finishing my BA, I started it was getting talked about with a new Mexican American Studies Master's program, and I was the first student to go through the cohort. And as soon as I got in, I got wrapped around with this amazing group of progressive Latino professors at the University of Texas, and I got to do cutting edge policy work. I got to just get right into the Texas legislature and start advising legislators and bringing some of the message of what cutting edge research was doing here at UT Austin and how that can go help our families, the same kind of people that I grew up with in the Rio Grande Valley. And so my first bill, working at UT Austin, working on a bill and getting it over to the legislature, was about grants for dropout students and developing extracurricular activities for them. And it became tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of clubs, thousands of schools across the state of Texas, and very successful for several years. So I came up through, wanting to do something for the people I grew up with that was, not as fortunate or lucky as I was.
Before I ask Timo the same question here, was your family involved in politics or outreach, or were you pretty much the first out of your family?
Yeah, I was the first out of my family to get in politics. My mother was Levi seamstress. My father was a bread truck driver for Bread Crust. Bread, and as I grew up older and I went to college, they started their own small business and they started to live a typical middle class American lifestyle. But growing up, it was sort of very different. And my mother and my father and their siblings have all been very successful, and they grew up over time, and they've had a tremendous amount of opportunity in our country. And as the Valley has developed, that they have grown and they've been able to develop. And I think, but while they live in the business world, and some of my aunts and uncles live in the health field or other places, I was the only one in the family that kind of took a little bit different course and went into the political world. And it was just about seeing the same kind of opportunities that my mother and father and the people around us fought so hard for I could have. We need to get systemic change to make sure that everybody had those opportunities, and that's why I got involved.
Timo, was there a transformational moment for you, or what got you to the poll?
I think similar to Manny, I grew up in the probably one of the worst areas of Houston in terms of people call it barrio. It's known as a drug running area, 77093. Was on welfare. My parents were legal immigrants. They got amnesty in '86. So my perspective comes from that. And growing up, also evangelical Christian, I wasn't political until I got to college, and I started taking a lot of the political science classes and got into the philosophical side of things. And I really liked the classical liberalism, more of the Hayek and Friedman, Edmund Burke and those guys. And I was always passionately looking at, here we came from another land. And my dad was a shepherd boy from the mountains of Mexico, San Luis Potosí, and we're here trying to make it. And I'm like, why did we leave? What's the difference between this society, that society? I came to the conclusion that I believe in the traditional institutions of society, family unit. I believe in small community, localized community. I believe that small business, what Alexis de Tocqueville called the platoons of democracy. I saw it as the strength of this country, and I think the immigrant class, and that's who I'm really passionate about. You know, I know there are other, even in my party, there are other points of view. There's Tejano, and I'm more focused and passionate about the 50,000 young people who are becoming voters, who are the sons of immigrants and daughters of immigrants. I think when I look at what makes this country great, I think we, from our background, I think we re-infuse those American ideals. We're super family unit oriented. We're very competitive. We just want to have a fair shot. We're a free market. Personally, our experience in Mexico, you know, even to this day, it's tough to really rise up and really try to make something happen. So all that kind of came together, and I chose the Republican side as
Is your family, do they identify with the Republican?
No, you know, they don't. They don't. They're not even political, and I think that's what drives me. I see the entire community I grew up in. There's not a lot of political activism. There's not organization, and you know, I commend Doña Castro here. You know, no matter what party you're at the end of the day, it takes hard work. You know, that's really the secret to either party. To reach the Mexican Hispanic vote, it's hard work. You know, it's really getting down and dirty. And I know my party, the agitator, I'm always advocating my party. You call it Hispanic outreach. I've spoken to Ryan Priebus, the RNC chairman, all the way down. That's everybody. I met everybody who's somebody. And they preach it, but I don't think you're ready. I don't think you know what it means. And that's, you know, that it's hard work, really.
We'll definitely get into that. Vincent, of course, we've talked about how you've broken ground as the youngest chairman for the Travis County Democrats and second African American. What was your entry into politics?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be on this panel. I do want to recognize Senator Barrientos here in the room. And you know, for me, I grew up in a faith-based home. I was watching a documentary as a teenager, and I saw poor kids in Africa, and it tore me up on the inside. And what I did was I took out a calculator and I calculated how much money it would cost to help provide food and shelter for these individuals. And the number was staggering. And I said, even if I become a billionaire, it won't matter because I can't help out the poorest people in our world. But I thought maybe through government and through politics, I could help provide opportunities for the poorest people, but also speak up for those that cannot speak for themselves. And I think in our country, a lot of times minorities, whether it be black, brown, Asian, or poor whites, we haven't had a voice. And I think that's one of the things that's been a priority to me is speaking up for those that do not have the resources or the access to different opportunities. So when I came to Travis County, I had the opportunity to work at the Travis County Juvenile Public Defender's Office. And many of the kids were African American or Latino. And I saw how in Travis County we have one of the premier juvenile public defender's offices in the state as well as in the country. And I saw that we have a special place here where we'll invest in the next generation to provide second opportunities for our kids. So that's something that I've been working on, is making sure that all of our kids have a great opportunity. And I think it's just letting people know how they can get involved in the process and how big of an impact that they can have.
You and I talked just before we started here about, you know, we're talking about mobilizing Latinos, but also part of the equation, that would be whatever the demographic is, the young vote, right? You know, the youth participation, and I think that might be an issue we'll want to talk to you about based on your outreach. Mrs. Castro, I know that both Congressman Castro and Secretary Castro have both pointed to their upbringing as to why they do what they do. What was your entry and your involvement for the past 5 decades into your community in San Antonio?
Well, I think that, you know, I got involved in politics out of necessity. I was coming up at a time, and I'm much older than anybody here, probably all of their ages together combined to me. But I came up at a time when, in 1965, when I'm graduating, 80% of Latinos were dropping out. Our college going rate was 4%. 4%. You know, so it was obvious to me. I had gone to school in Catholic school for 12 years. And, you know, it isn't until lately that I talk about that I think that the Gospels, the teachings of Christ in terms of social justice really hit home. You couldn't go to a Catholic school for 12 years and 6 days out of the week go to hear the gospel and not understand that it was absolutely necessary to work for justice. And as we saw, all the injustices, all the discrimination, all of, you looked around, there was no Gonzalo Barrientos. There was no single-member districts. There was nobody on TV or in the newspapers or on the school boards. That's a different world. My son says she was brought up in a different world. Yes, it was a very, a world that set limits based on your color, based on your language, based on the fact of where you came. My mother had come from Mexico. And I just didn't see that that was right or correct or should continue. And I think with the Chicano movement, that is why you hear the cry of "Ya basta." For me, that came very early on. And for a lot of people that I met, first I started in the Democratic Party, and if you recall back at that time, the Democratic Party was really the Republicans' conservative top part of that ruled the Democratic Party, and then you had the liberal wing. I was part of the liberal wing. But there were many roadblocks to running for office, and one of those was the amount that had to be paid to run for office at that time. It was a percentage of salaries of what people were making. Other things were poll taxes, the gerrymandering. All of these things, some of which we've talked about, you have talked about for a couple of days now, were in place. And those of us that are coming out of college are understanding that in the United States of America, if you want to make policy, change policy, be represented, you and elect people, you have to participate in politics. You have to. There's no other way. That's what a democracy is, participation. So, I was involved in college with the Young Democrats, then later testified before the Senate on the right to vote at 18. I often say, I wish I could tell you we won that one, but it was until the federal laws changed. And that's one of the things that I saw early on, too, that for Texans, for those of us that were Latino and African American, people of color, things didn't get better except for two things. First, litigation, and that was, a lot of it was done with widely registered single-member districts, and federal laws. So I think we all set about trying to reform the political system. When I joined Racinita, I ran for city council at 23 in 1971, prior to Racinita. But with Racinita, we felt, and we had African Americans that ran in San Antonio along with the Latinos. We felt that it was absolutely necessary, if we were going to get Latinos to vote, to participate in the political system, there must be candidates that appealed to Latinos. There must be candidates who said, we're going to work on education so that the state of Texas no longer puts more money into sheep and cattle and highways than it puts into education of its children. We were young, we were idealists. We felt that between the folks that were interested in changing things, we could make an impact. I don't know that at that point in my life, I realized that the United States is a two-party system, and that's a very hard thing to break. But I believe that we made a lot of change in Racinita. One of the immediate changes, my mother and my folks at home who had never voted for the first time. We saw that with a lot of Latinos. And part of that was to be on the ballot, and we were the first in any state to be on the ballot. You had to get a certain number of signatures from people who had not voted. And so we did that, and so when we came back into the actual voting time, these people were voting. So it was a whole new generation, both young and old, of voters that we were able to bring to the polls, and other things that came as a result of the party. But I was very happy to be part of registering voters, getting voters to the polls, being the head of Bexar County Racinita Party, and being able to run the election precinct by precinct, and all of those things which gave us an opportunity to know the election code book backwards and forwards, to be able to quote it to you at that time. I mean, but those are the folks, young people, many, not all, that then stayed in the political realm for years. I didn't win my race in 1973 when I ran against the Good Government League with the Barrio Betterment Committee. 30 years later, my son won his first council race, and then the following year, my other son runs and wins the state rep race.
Did you ever envision or imagine that both of your sons would be this prominent in U.S. politics, really?
No, I think that every parent imagines their kid is the most smart. And, right, I mean, but I never did imagine it. I did not imagine it, but I worked towards what I had hoped for was, one, that my sons would be engaged citizens, that they would not, even in their youth, because we all know that 18 to 24 has the worst voting record, that they would always vote, they would always participate, but I really never wanted to force them into anything they may not like. Julian, when he was at Stanford, wrote a piece that was published in one of the professor's books about how he, was dragged to all these meetings, dragged to the polls, dragged to all this stuff, and he never wanted to really be involved in it. But as he was at Stanford, he realizes, and he starts to look back at the political structure and studies Target 90 and all of these, both of them did that. They had Luis Fraga, who's here, and was a great mentor. As he looked at all of that, and he looked at what he had done in his lifetime, and he looked at things that he did, like both of them, like volunteering in different organizations, when he looked at that, he realized that, hey, it wasn't so bad after all. Hey, this was the route to go. And they both ran for Senate at Stanford, and they both won. That was our first political race.
It is amazing how for our children, as they get older, we become smarter, right? So, obviously, that all rubbed off on them. Okay, let me bring something else in to kind of consider here. And Pew Research Center, I'm sure everyone here familiar with. It's highly respected, I think, from participants and non-participants alike in terms of their research. And one thing that I took out was that with immigration shaping up to be a major issue in both the final years of the Obama administration and, of course, the 2016 presidential campaign you may have heard about going on, most Americans, 72%, continue to say that undocumented immigrants currently living in the U.S. should be allowed to stay in the country legally if certain requirements are met. And I bring that up now because that has been in the news, very prominently because of the Republican side of the debate. But is this something that is going to galvanize Latinos to the poll, or is it another situation that is discouraging Latinos? And again, this is not meant to be argumentative, but it is something that is, in everybody's sights right now. Tell me, I'll let you.
Look, I've been in our party. I've been the passionate agitator, like they call it. 2008, our platform said mass deportation, and we went in with a network of not only just Hispanic Republicans, but moderates, the W. Bush guys, and some of the Midland boys and the business guys, and we changed the platform to a guest worker program, and then it went back to mass deportation by attrition, and it's starting to go back and forth. But we're actually organizing. We're actually showing up. But I think immigration is the issue. The Republican Party knows it. They can't hide it. I've been in meetings with Reince Priebus. They commissioned a post specifically with the Growth and Opportunity Project, which was the autopsy report after 2012. They know it's immigration. They unfortunately, a lot of the Republican leaders will say that, the Pew Research poll says that the number one issue is actually jobs and economy. But the poll that we heard, and I've heard repeatedly in high-level meetings, is that the number one issue that will cause Democrats to actually turn the dial in favor of Republicans would be immigration. If the Republican Party would just do the right thing on immigration, you would have a lot of people who would consider voting Republican. So I think it is going to galvanize voters. But two ways. I think you're going to have the Republicans, if they don't do the right thing, which it's looking like they might not, they're not going to win the Hispanic vote. That's a major thing. Also, the definition of Hispanic. In the RNC, Hispanic is Cuban controlled or Central American controlled, and W. Bush did the opposite. He organized a lot of the California boys and the Texas boys who were of Mexican heritage. He was able to win a lot of the battleground areas. That's one. Two, immigration for him was a huge issue, the way he approached the community, and that's not being repeated. We've forgotten our own heritage in the Republican Party when it comes to Reagan and W. Bush. And I think even Sean Hannity, 2012, on the night of when we got creamed, he looked into the TV camera and he said, guys, we're going to have to do something with immigration. We're going to need a push for a pathway to citizenship. The night of, that's what Sean Hannity said. The party knows that they need to do it. Now, on the Democrat side, my opinion is, I think also the Democratic Party, I think they've also dropped the ball on immigration. And I think it's 2014, it was shown by the lack of turnout in the Hispanic community. I was able to win a race. Texas Tribune called it the shocker of the night because we were in a 74% Hispanic district in Houston and Pasadena. And we won by 155 votes. We were turning people at the polls, we were flipping them. And immigration, I was telling people at the polls, that the Democrats deliver on immigration in Spanish. That's what I was using that. And so I think it shows that immigration is the issue for both parties.
And let me ask Manny, because just even in the most recent GOP debate, right, you did see a bit of a division among what some would call the more moderate wing of the Republican Party, saying that no, we can't have mass deportation, and there definitely was criticism of President Obama initially not really pushing for immigration reform. So from the Democratic Party standpoint, how do you see the immigration issue playing out in mobilizing Latinos to the polls?
Well, there's a couple of things to think about here. One thing to think about is positions of Texas Republicans and what they've thought about our community and what they've put in their platform. There was a lot of to-do about a guest worker program going into the Texas Republican Party platform. Everybody was so excited about it. They had put this in. They had changed it. Well, then it got stripped away this last go around, right? And in that same platform where there was still to-do about this guest worker program in the Texas Republican platform, there was a challenge to birthright citizenship within that platform. There was a call to end the Voting Rights Act within that platform. There was a call to remove, to decrease funding at all levels for education within that platform. So you look at these positions and they don't add up. They don't add up with what regular Latino families are dealing with on a daily, in their daily lives. So they can talk a good game and give a couple of lines, but then you start looking deeper and it doesn't match up with what the community needs. And then it's further concerning that the architect of the platform for two conventions is now the state party chair of the state Republican Party, Tom Medler. And while he talks about Hispanic engagement isn't just putting people out into the field and getting folks. You have to be there with your principles. You have to be there with your policies. You have to walk the walk. So it's concerning to see that. Over on the Democratic side, we are extremely disappointed that immigration reform hasn't happened. And Texas Democrats have been quite vocal about that. And sometimes that conflicts with our national party when we speak loudly about these things. But when you look at what just happened, and a new speaker was elected, Speaker Paul Ryan, and the first thing he said right out the gate is, I'm not going to work on comprehensive immigration reform with this president. So we're going into election, and your leading Republican now is saying, I'm not even going to work on this issue. And then you look at the where their candidates are, Donald Trump and Ben Carson and Ted Cruz, and you even start going down. You look at Marco Rubio and the Texas Dream Act. You look at Jeb, and there's a lot of concerns, and there's differences in tone. I'll give them that. There's differences in tone, but not in the substance. Not in what matters in the end.
And even with the immigration going on, of course, anybody can chime in on the immigration issue, but Temo mentioned the economy, and I have seen polling where it's saying that Hispanic voters have indicated that, what are lawmakers going to do to make my life better economically? Right. Vincent, do you see that play out when it comes to finding a way to get those who have not been going to the polls, even the registered voters who have not been going to the polls, to get to the polls?
I think so. I think I think hard work and reaching out, but I do think the economic issue is going to be very, very important. And I think the moderators of the Republican debate did a good job of just giving the facts
Talk
that.
about the minimum wage, for example.
Yes, and they talked about the minimum wage. Democrats are universally in favor of increasing it. You see the Republicans, they have a difference of opinion. So we've seen that. But also just when it comes to just sheer job numbers and jobs that have been created, they also pointed out that Democratic presidents, private sector jobs, have increased more under Democratic presidents as opposed to Republican presidents. In fact, since 1961, I believe the numbers are 48 million under Democrats and 24 million under Republicans. That's 2 to 1. I didn't see any new sort of economic plan. It was more the same trickle-down economics. But then also in Texas, we like to talk about how many jobs that we are creating, and we're always in the top 5 in job creation, but we're always in the lowest 5 when it comes to healthcare. So there has to be some sort of correlation between the jobs we're creating not having healthcare, or at least it was in the past. So I think those are going to be some of the big things moving forward as the wage issues and job issues along with healthcare.
Ms. Castro, what do you think is the issue that would get Hispanics, Latinos to the poll?
Well, I don't know if there's just one issue. For one, when we look at immigration, that's a very important area in our community for all Latinos, I think. And I saw maybe 7 years ago, you see the Dreamers and folks like that who cannot vote, but their kind of rallying and bringing the issue forward was a real rallying point for all Latinos. You know, there were these huge marches, and we had them in San Antonio, we had them in Houston, we had them in LA, and that was kind of one of the first sparks. And with anything, it takes time. Okay, so then now you have a situation this year where you have the Republican Party candidates, all of whom have said such horrible things against Latinos, not just immigration, but the issues that Latinos care for, the economy. We all know that the economy has always been better under Democratic presidents. The minimum wage, the equal pay for women, the issues of health for women. Every aspect that I as a Latina would be interested in does not find itself spoken to in the Republican Party in any meaningful way. Another way of saying is that they're not relevant to Latinos at all. And I think that when you look at the numbers of people who say they will vote, there's not a whole lot of them. And I thank Mr. Trump and Mr. Carson and Mr. Cruz for that. Because if anything is going to mobilize people, it's going to be that kind of rhetoric that starts off by making the immigrant, now not all of which are Latinos and Mexicans, by the way, but it makes the immigrant the punching bag, the boogeyman. And that Republicans have used over and over again, and we're getting very tired of that. Where I see the hope, and I've been posting on my Facebook, all these articles that are coming in, I hope there's more, about the young women that were elected in Seattle and Yakima, and I know one of those young women in Yakima, and the young women in Massachusetts, and the Latinos in Massachusetts, in different cities. And what I see there is that they're hungry, just like we were in the 60s and 70s and 50s. Those people are hungry because they were never represented. Now they're getting a chance. They're making their chance, along with litigation, ACLU in Washington. They're getting an opportunity to assert themselves, to be able to create the kind of representation that will no longer make us the punching bag. So thank you to the presidential candidates, because I think, we're going to see something next year like we've never seen before. And what I hope we're going to see next year is the election of the first woman president.
And who might the vice presidential candidate be?
I don't know.
We'll get back to that in a second.
I just wanted to follow up on that really quickly. There was an article in the Washington Post that said Trump's comments and Cruz's refusal to denounce that led to an unprecedented meeting amongst Latino conservatives. So I think Latinos are paying attention, not only moderates and Democrats, but conservatives as well. And I think Trump's staying power has basically driven the Republican Party off the general election cliff. And I think, you know, the longer he stays up, the better it is for the Democrats. I think he's so far out there that it's just not going to appeal to mainstream America.
Look, I want to point out that where I stand and where a lot of us stand, it's clear. I've told Ted Cruz to his face. You know, his dad used to be on our organization as a national committee man. There's a huge civil war going over the definition of what conservatism means. You look at Trump, that's not conservatism, that's protectionism, that's populism, that's dark area of American history that he's tapping into. We recognize that. We're not getting any help from the media. The media, he's saying some ridiculous things, and we'll go out and we'll attack Trump, but look, it's ratings gold right now. You know, it benefits to have Trump go out there. I'm disappointed in the RNC for not stepping up. They told us that if anybody came out and spoke a certain way on immigration, according to the autopsy report to the Growth and Opportunity Project, they would come out publicly and speak out against it. They did not, because there's a lack of political will in our party when it comes to immigration. I recognize that. You do have someone like Jeb, though, and again, I'm biased because I am part of his team, but, you know, I've spoken to him personally, and I've met him and his wife and George P. and those guys, and they're for real when it comes to this issue. I think there's two ways, and I think the perfect example, and, you know, I really want to make it Latino mobilization, which is, I think immigration really is important here. I'm not trying to spin or anything, but both parties are insulting the Hispanic community, and they're tired of it. And I can give you an example. Last night, or a few days ago, President Obama was asked about Trump's comments. And look, he said the right thing. The deportation force is ridiculous. Can you imagine, like Elian Gonzalez, can you imagine guys with machine guns coming in and ripping people? My parents were illegal. I remember when we were at a store and there was a border patrol. It was worse back then in the 80s. You know, there was just random sweeps of stores, you know, or companies. It was crazy back in, I was a kid, I can remember it. But President Obama says, you know, it's crazy what Trump's proposing, right? But think about the record number of deportations that have happened in the last few years. There is a deportation force out there deporting people. I know some of these people that have been deported who were just working, who were picking up their kids at school, who were at Shipley's Donuts in Houston on Airline, people who were just working. This is both parties, you know, and I think we're at a point in this election, I think that's going to matter in the battleground states, New Mexico, Nevada, Colorado, Florida. You know, the Republicans used to lean on the Cuban vote. We lost the Cuban vote for the first time in history in 2012 in Florida. So we got to wake up. I think the Democrats have to wake up, and that's why I say yes and no. It's really about who's gonna make the Hispanic community, and I mean Hispanic, I mean 60%, 70% nationally, which is Mexican. Who's gonna be trusted when they say we're gonna fix immigration? I think both parties are. I admit my party's doing a horrible job, but I think both parties really have done a horrible job.
Yeah, we want to ask a question.
Yeah, well, it's my perspective on something I've seen. When you look at the immigration concept, everybody's looking at the what and not the why. And this has happened for years. Nobody's ever addressed why we're having so many undocumented kids, unaccompanied minors coming over the border. You know, they only focus on, okay, we have these many numbers, but nobody ever, at least in my knowledge, nobody's ever kind of even spoke to the why on both parties, as far as the way Mexico is and the way that the markets are almost gone and the amount of loss of life. And that's interesting when you want to be part of a political party, whatever you choose, Democrat or Republican. But I think we can both say, as Latinos, no party, whether Democrat or Republican, has even addressed the why, other than the unaccompanied minors when it was forced in everybody's face.
I think there's a huge opportunity from a free market perspective. Our party's position, I think it's a better position if we can get over the immigration thing and the populace. But Mexico, for example, the amount of free trade that's possible. You know, I went to a border energy forum with Jerry Patterson, and we're in Monterrey, and all these guys want the United States to come in and do business, but the cartels, they can't go in because they'll get extorted in Tamaulipas and all the. And I'm like, okay, if Mexico United States trade and Mexico prospers, there's less immigration. You got more work over there. You know, it's a good thing. But that's not. We don't even have that type of policy being proposed by any party. I think the Republicans are better positioned to pivot. But right now with the immigration issue, nobody's thinking about let's help Central America and you know let's trade, let's open up.
You know, but if you look back at history, a couple of things. The United States has never helped Central America or Latin America. We've never even given it the respect that we've given Europe or Asia or anybody else.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that. The other thing is we should not buy into the way immigration is spoken about in the Republican sphere. I'm saying immigration is also about the Asian immigration that's going to be mighty pissed off at no comprehensive immigration too. It's about Indian immigration. It's about people all over the world that are coming here. All we focus on is that southern border. It pisses me off because when we had 9/11, the people who came over, they think, that did whatever they did in 9/11 didn't come through Mexico. Although that's the first people everybody looked at. Oh my, the southern border. They must have come across. Besides, they look like us. They came through Canada, where we let people come in and out and don't really bother with them. I think we as Latinos have got to expand the way we talk about immigration. We've been pigeonholed into, and I see it with my sons, they get asked to speak, and what do they get asked? They're national figures. They get asked to speak on immigration. It's like, oh, well, that was a mayor. He knows about water, streets, drainage, health, you know, you name it, bonds. He can talk about any of that. But what does he get pigeonholed in if it's immigration? So I think that if we're going to win this battle, if we're ever going to have comprehensive immigration, we need to really look at what is that about. And I just don't see, you know, Republican Party can say, well, the Democrats haven't. Well, yeah, they haven't been in control in how long? And the Hastert rule, and having a congressman and talking about things that people don't understand, like that Hastert rule. I'm not even sure I'm saying it right. They get to keep that off the table. Even when there were enough Republicans that would have voted for the Senate plan or something like it, the House, Speaker of the House, kept that off the table, kept it from being discussed. Who is screwing up immigration? There's only one party that's screwing it up right now. So I think that we really need to also broaden and look at what the other issues that we as Latinos are really important for us.
What's another issue that?
Education, economics. But education, because many of us, and I don't know if it's the same for y'all, but for my family, education was the way out of poverty. And for a lot of families, that's still the way out of poverty. And if you are now come to a point where it costs so much to go to school that you can't go to school, that's a real limitation. As a grandmother, I don't want that limitation for my grandchildren. As a parent, you don't want that limitation for your children. You want somebody who can say, okay, how do we bring those costs down?
Now, I know that, and Temo, just
Sure.
to kind of throw something your way, is that, for example, former Governor Perry was very adamant about, let's try to keep costs down. Let's have, you know, graduation in 4 years. I think it was a $10,000. I mean, this is something that Republicans see as well.
Yeah, education. There are guys out there. I know a lot of state reps. Larry Gonzalez from Round Rock, huge education guy. In Republican Party, you have guys that are about the same thing. Our message is being block. I can block walk all day, which I've done block walking and try to win races. And from a presidential standpoint, from the Latino mobilization standpoint, to vote, I can have a flyer. I can have the elephant with the talking points about education. But we're losing because of our immigration stance. That's clear. But I do want to point out to Ms. Castro that on my side, I come up against people that will say. They call themselves conservative, and they say their talking points of, well, can't you understand illegal is illegal, and I know I can cut through all that, and I know that some of these guys, 20 to 30%, when I tell them, look, Ellis Island, why not us? They do see us. They say, national security, but it is about, in their opinion, and Trump's really touching into that, that we are not capable of adjusting to Western civilization, that we are not capable of being Americans because, we're tribalistic, or, you can go down the line, right, as to what, that's the mentality that I have to win over. And so I have to narrow it down because they are targeting us as Hispanic, Mexican. And so
we got to, they're expressing a sense of nativism and a sense of racism that's embedded within them, and they live through their lives. But it doesn't just hold itself to immigration issues. This gets embedded in the way you think, the way you make decisions. And so when we start looking at what are the major battlefronts in the Texas legislature, for example, why is Texas redistricting how it is? When we have thousands of Latinos that are growing, African Americans that are growing, and what do we have as a result? A discriminatory redistricting map.
But
when we look at at school finance, and we've been in years of court cases in school finance, and we would look at having to make the decision of will we develop a system where funds are sent from one area that is property wealthy and more Anglo to another area that is property poor, happens to be more Latino. Who will make that decision? And who's not willing to make that decision? And I think it's really clear over the years where the different parties are on this, on who's willing to make that decision to fight for equalized school funding, to fully fund our neighborhood schools, to invest, and who isn't. When we look at college, for example, who's willing to keep the door open of opportunity? We all got together and we passed the Texas Dream Act. That was great. Democrats and Republicans passed the Texas Dream Act. Who's trying to tear it apart?
who defends it, though? Who actually
protected it still?
Who's protected it still with the majority in the House?
No.
I spoke to a lot of legislators.
Here's the thing.
But look,
when we formed the major block of what holds a bill away, and a couple of angel Republicans decide to join us because it makes rational sense, we thank them for joining us.
If it doesn't come out of committee, it doesn't come out of committee. That's how it works. It's not going to get passed. But this is the deal. I want to go back to immigration because it needs to be spoken about. You know, I know. Look, we can talk about other policy issues and education, and we can do all that. But the deal.
Yes.
What for all the panelists up there? What do you know is the latest thinking on how Mexican Americans view immigration in terms of priority, importance, or whatever?
My experience, again, from Republican side, my experience is, well, not only does polling show that it's the #1 issue in Texas, overall, now again, from a party standpoint, having to win them over, to win their hearts and minds, to get them up to vote Republican. I think that's a huge incentive for our party. You want to win elections, and especially you want to scale it up to a national level, which we haven't won a presidency in 8 years. You know, we've gotten slaughtered when it comes to the Hispanic vote, which is really the Mexican vote, at 60 to 70%. I think it's huge. And look, when it comes to the issue of immigration, if the Democratic Party goes into this election thinking that they are the party of immigration for the community, I think they're gonna get. The people are not going to turn out. Now, the Republicans, again, but that's just, again, I'm not saying that the Republicans, them too, we're in trouble. Now, Jeb, of course, I'm biased, but I think he's the only guy that can do the job when it comes to expressing a reasonable solution to the whole issue.
Let Ms. Castro.
I think when you're looking at political engagement, you're looking at the question of, what's going to arouse people or what issues are important to people. I think you have to look at, on the one hand, the party, Republican, both parties say we want immigrants, we want somehow or another. But in reality, the kinds of public policy that the Democratic Party creates around voting rights is the policy that limits your rights, that tends to curtail those rights. Whether it is, and they're driven by this group called ALEC, as we all know, that creates these public policy missives that they send on down to the Republicans to pass that limit the number of days of early voting, that do not allow for same-day registration, that do not allow for that have IDs to go vote, that allow you to use a gun-carrying ID.
Concealed handgun license.
Yeah, you can use that, but you can't use a student ID. The kind of laws in redistricting, all of those voting laws the party has passed tell Latinos, because we're not dumb people, that we're not invited to vote, that they're trying to keep the vote away from people.
Let you follow up on your
I
question here.
didn't ask my question clearly or whatever, but it's my sense that Mexican-American registered voters in Texas don't give a shit about a whole lot of stuff because they don't turn out to vote. And I don't think that a lot of Mexican-Americans are interested in immigration. That's my sense. I could be wrong, but that's my sense, especially living here in Austin now, 11 years.
But is that turning them off?
Yeah. Well, look,
Well, so I'll say that there are regional differences. You know, Texas Mexicanos, Texas Latinos aren't all the same. There are regional differences. We're a massive state, so I will say that. But also going to that, yes, and Rosie's been talking about this. Wages, education, healthcare. These are fundamental issues that are on the minds of Latino families every day when you wake up and when you go to sleep. And criminal justice reform, I'll add that too. And so yes, there are other issues that are going around. On immigration, it will always be one of these top 5 issues when you poll it on any poll. It just keeps on coming back.
Even among Hispanics?
Yeah. But it's also this sort of fundamental deal that are you okay with somebody like me being in this country or not? You know, and so we'll we may be second, third generation, but we'll have tios or tias that aren't, and we'll have relatives that aren't, or new people that are coming in that are part of a community that aren't. So it's kind of an ever-present kind of issue that sticks around.
I'm going to let Senator Barrientos jump in here, and then I want to ask Vincent a question here.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. There's so much to discuss and so much knowledge to gain, but mobilizing the Latino vote. Does anyone on the panel have the latest statistics on the population of American Hispanics? And what percentage are Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, etc.? Second part of the question is, considering the number of Americans of Hispanic descent in Texas, what are the obstacles preventing Hispanics from winning elected offices? And by the way, Mr. Muniz, I really respect you for being here today. I wish that the Republican Party would be here more in numbers to support you.
thanks, sir.
And I'm a Democrat.
I agree. And Samuel was very willing to be here. Just to jump in, you guys may have better data, but having Senator just looked at on the national level, I think of those who are identified as Hispanic or Latino, about 60% roughly have the origin from Mexico. I think that's. Is anybody?
Yeah, but the 2010 census has all that information.
Yeah,
You're right.
I think
60% Mexican American.
Yeah.
It's all there.
I think 16 to 20 million of Hispanic registered voters are of Mexican heritage. The closest one I think is Puerto Rican. I think it's at 6 or 7 million, and then Cubans at 4. But it's a big block.
One thing that I saw in that Pew Center study too that I was looking at that's easily available, right? Everybody can look at, but that in terms of the amount of undocumented people coming into the U.S., I mean that's leveled off over the last 2 decades, from what I understand. That really there hasn't been a rise. It's really kind of capped where we have that 11 million, 12 million figure of undocumented citizens in our country. But that's kind of stayed stable. And so when we're talking about some of the issues about building a wall and, preventing the tide. Really there hasn't been a tide, right, over 20 years. It's really, what do you do with the 11 million people who are here? And we've seen that conversation going on the presidential campaign. Go
Well,
ahead.
it's that plus, I forget the exact numbers, only 60,000, 18-year-olds that are Latinos that are, every year turning 18 plus.
50,000 a month.
And it's 100,000 of Anglos to that same number that are dying off. So it's an interesting thing that is happening. The birth rate is not just the immigrant population. It's all of us that have been here for a long, long time. And these are people now that, like, my generation was the first, my sons were the second. These folks are the ones that are running for office now, that are building, power bases and stuff. And I think what you see is that they're going to surprise everybody. We're always thinking that our numbers come out of this immigrant population, too. Some do. But we have a lot of homegrown. That is a wave that sooner or later, as you start to see Mexican-American studies in the high schools and in the junior highs, as people start to finally recognize their own history, our history, I think you're going to see some awakenings there.
Before I get to your question there, I wanted to ask Vincent a question here in terms of, and again, I kind of touched on it as we did our introductions, but and Mrs. Castro was talking about the population in terms of the age group, right? And I mean, it seems like in the Hispanic population, those who are not voting are young people, right? And Manny, you may correct me if I'm wrong here, but that the young vote is a big issue, regardless of the demographic, but in particular among Hispanics. You block walked. I mean, you try to get people to the polls. You've done that as minority outreach in the past. Is it a matter of we need better ways of registering people? Is it just the turnout among the registered voters? It's a combination. I mean, what's the success rate that you've had in block walking?
I believe it's a combination of things. I think one of the major things is the number of contacts, knocking on doors, the phone calls, going to some of the cultural events as well. I think one of the bigger problems is that when you just show up right before election time and ask people to vote. So I think that the key is the quarter by quarter contact year round. I believe that's so important. But then also, I think there's this misperception among some people when it comes to Latinos and the internet and Latinos and cell phones and social media. In fact, one of the largest users of social media are Latinos or young Latinos. And I think we need to look at all ways in which to reach out to Latinos to get them involved. And I think for all young people, and I guess all people in general, is figuring out the impact that you can have in the political process. And I think for me, from my own experience, not growing up in a political home, when you don't know something, you simply do not know. And I think it's just going to take the hard work of letting people know, getting involved, not only voting, but going to meetings and going to city council or going to the legislature and testifying. I think when people can see the impact that they can have, that's when we'll see an increase in numbers moving forward.
Let me add one thing to that. That is, for our own party, and I don't know how the Republicans do this, but for over 20, 30 years, the way we've done block walking and running for office and campaigning has been a scientific way, okay? So you get a list of consistent voters, and that's who you go knock on the door and call and all that. Well, what happens to those people next door that have never been consistent voters that may or may not be registered? They might be registered, but they never voted. We left them alone. All these years, we don't go to their house. And I know when we were campaigning, I would always say, we should do every house. And everybody, especially a campaign manager, would say, are you crazy? It costs too much. But that's why we find ourselves in this situation.
Yeah.
That people have not been invited to the table. Sometimes they don't know how to vote or what's out there, and they're scared. Who do they say, I don't know how to do this? There's no family history. So one group that I find has been very effective in going after non-consistent voters is TOP, Texas Organizing Project. And they are in San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. They helped in Wendy Davis's election when she won the Senate race the first time. But I think that's what we have to do. Our party has to go after the non-consistent voters if we want to drive that.
Let me cut in real quick. I agree with, and that's what the first thing I said. It's hard work. It's not sexy in the consulting world. And that's why I decided to run Gilbert Pena versus Marianne Perez, because nobody wanted to listen on the Republican side. They didn't believe it could happen because it was actually drawn, according to Texas Tribune, in favor of the Democrats. But we took, $13,000 versus $250,000, and we did grassroots for the first time, probably in the history of the Republican Party, for an Hispanic district. The Republicans used to do it when they first started out under John Tower. That's how the Republican Party came to existence. They know grassroots back then. Now, there's a lot, they have to relearn it. But we actually went toe-to-toe against Tops in Houston, and Tops they're fierce, and the guys mobilized. Look, we didn't have the data, so sometimes we would follow Tops, right? They go to a house and we'll wait, and then right? It's kind of the hustle way of doing things. But we beat Marianne Perez. That's Tops, Planned Parenthood Action, SEI Union. Marianne Perez is $250,000, and we beat her. Now, I do want to point out, though, that one thing that was the reason, I think, and I say a lot about immigration because I'm passionate, and I didn't want to be an immigration guy when I joined the Republican Party, but that's how I've become in order to expand it. But it's really about I'm saying immigration because the battleground states, presidential, New Mexico, Nevada, Florida, Colorado, it's going to matter in those areas. But just to give you an example of what happened with Marianne Perez, and look, she with all due respect, there was an issue, a local issue that was actually racial tension based. You had the Voter Rights Act was changed, I think, from a decision in Georgia. Pasadena, Texas, and Flower Mound were the only two cities that decided to change their city council districts. Right? Pasadena had all single districts, and they wanted to make out of I think there was 8. They wanted to take 2 of those single district city council seats and turn them to at-large, which the Hispanic community saw it as you taking away traditionally Hispanic seats. So what happened? When that fight went down in Pasadena, local politics, media came out, it was a huge issue. The guy that we ran back then, he actually showed up and fought for that. Okay, this is a guy, refrigeration guy, blue collar boy. He showed up and he fought for the community. And Marianne Perez was nowhere to be found. You better believe we used that when we were knocking on doors. It gave us a great opening. And look, you do what you do. But that's how we beat Tops and those guys, because of that misstep. So we were on the ground, and I agree with Doña Castro, is like, you got to be in the ground, sweating, knocking on doors, and that's not sexy anymore to today's consulting class.
Go ahead.
We were
I'll let
talking-
you finish just a second.
We were talking about platforms and kind of assigning blame to what party, but if you look at Austin, for example, it's been Democrat for years, and, there's redness. But even in Austin, if you look at local politics, we have 20% of African Americans leaving the city. We're the largest city in growing, and we have 20% of our African American population leaving. 50% of kids born that are Hispanic, 5 years and under, are born in poverty. It has nothing to do with the Republican or Democratic Party or platforms. So those are the issues that kind of contribute to voter disenfranchisement. When I ran, speaking of that, they didn't say, we were not Democrat or Republican. They were saying, why don't we have jobs? Why are the African Americans leaving? Why are the Latinos leaving? And that's, at least by observation, no party has spoken to that, because those are economic areas and those are growth that speak more than any platform, whether it comes from Democrat or Republican.
Well, I'll say.
Go ahead, and then I'll let Vince.
I mean, economics are a result of policy systems. All right, economics are a result of policy systems. Policy systems that are designed to get certain outcomes. The design in Texas has to create a tremendous number of low-wage jobs, keep healthcare costs high, keep education costs high, not fund public institutions, and hence you get the result. right? I mean, when you deny Medicaid expansion, that helps keep healthcare costs high for people. When you don't fund public education, that makes sure that only the ones that have can have quality public education, the one that can't, they don't. And when we know that voting is correlated with education, you're directly affecting who's then making the decisions out into the future, right? When you don't want to raise the minimum wage, or you want to get rid of the minimum wage, when you don't want to do equal pay for equal work, when you don't want to do paid family leave, when you start going down all of these economic policies and platform planks, you're affecting the system and how regular families are living their daily lives and the kinds of opportunities that are before them. I want to go to something that the senator said a little earlier about what is holding back Latino candidates from being able to win, right? A couple of things here. One is we need to develop a Latino donor class, Latino political donor class. And there's you need to build the resources to be able to mount these kinds of campaigns. These campaigns have to be viable. The maps are not viable. The maps are gerrymandered in such a way to make sure that the populations are not represented, right? These are discriminatory maps. They're ruled discriminatory by a DC federal district court. And what Demo was referring to when it was one of the Voting Rights Act cases ultimately resulted in removing federal preclearance. When you removed preclearance, all of these municipalities, Texas legislature, counties were let loose to be able to do what they wanted to do to change voting laws without then having to answer to the federal government about it and pre-clearing them before they went into effect. It is within the Republican Party's platform to eliminate the Voting Rights Act. So within their platform here in Texas to eliminate the Voting Rights Act. And that organizing effort that you were a part of, Gilbert Pena was a part of, a Democrat, Cody Ray Wheeler, was a part of. Cody Ray Wheeler is running against Mary Ann in a primary right now, in that same district from before. And actually, Top was organizing on the Pasadena, the local Pasadena issue. So they've been working on mobilizing this community. But yeah, it's this effect of the Voting Rights Act then let city council districts, county commissioner districts, and we saw this happen in different cities across Texas, and we saw that happen, of course, across the nation once you removed this preclearance issue. So then that's another issue. Voter ID starts tagging on, right? So why is it harder for a Latino candidate to win? When you start tagging on voter ID, that has an effect. There was a Rice University study that looked at the effect of voter ID and all the rhetoric about voter ID on the actual election. They looked at CD 23, Congressional District 23, which is one of the most competitive in the country. And it's Will Hurd versus, right now, it looks like Pete Gallego. And there was, the findings from Rice University was that there was enough of a percentage of folks that either didn't have the ID to vote or thought they didn't have the ID to vote, and so then stayed home and didn't vote to sway the election. So that has an effect. And then voter registration drives, the different laws that were changed on that, making it so hard to register people to vote, and increasing all sorts of you're basically criminalizing developing the civic engagement.
One thing that just happened, right, is that the San Antonio District Court decided to keep the maps in place for the 2016 election. They're still considering the case, though, right?
Yeah. And these are, they are court-ordered interim maps. They weren't the original maps by the 2011 legislature. But what's so concerning about these is the way they were designed. Court-ordered interim maps were designed. We went into the Supreme Court and explained to the San Antonio Federal District Court how we had to draw these maps. You had to keep as much of the intent of the legislature as possible when you were addressing these maps. So the court-ordered interim maps do not remove all the stain of discrimination. It's still embedded in there. And that's why they've never been final maps, and moving forward, we still need to get a final ruling on all of this, a final ruling that respects the population of Texas.
After this next election cycle, right?
Yeah.
You asked for percentages. I want to give you this as an example. In 2014, we focused on a little bit over 60,000 voters in Travis County, made up of about 40 precincts. In those were highly Latino, highly African American. Of about those 60,000, we saw about 20,000 of them came out and voted. So this was a huge success because we targeted those individuals that either had never voted before or had only voted once or twice. And this is the type of work that it's going to take to move the state forward, is reaching out to those people that have never voted before, empowering them to be a part of the political process. You know, we can't say exactly they voted because of this, but we do think it was a significant factor. And it wasn't, I think another reason why it was successful, because it wasn't just the first time we had done it here. Like, so back in 2010, people like Rachel Torres and a number of other people did an outstanding job of focusing on 21 precincts. And it's going to be that type of work, the consistent work, year in and year out, that's going to really make the difference. And I think it's going to be the key in really getting the Latino vote out, is making those constant contacts and allowing them to be a part of the process.
More from the groundswell of a smaller district. I mean, not looking from the top down, from the bottom up.
Bottom up.
Can I jump in on the Republican?
Absolutely, and then I'm going to open it up to questions.
So
here.
to talk about lack of Latino candidates, what I've seen on the Republican side is I think there's a lack of knowledge, a lack of patience. What I've seen is not many people want to play the long game or are patient enough to build a movement like Doña Castro, who, you know, I have high respect, because it's easy for me to step in here now that, you know, I can go to ART or TLR and those guys, big money guys, and say, hey, I have this race, it's a battleground, throw some money. Oh, yes, mutual interest. But there is sort of a Wild West. Like, I think the Hispanic vote really still hasn't really been won, in my opinion. It's like an open book, and they're looking to see who's going to be the guy that really touches and mobilizes. And I think we lack knowledge and patience. I look at the Cuban guys in Florida in the Republican Party. They have state rep race. They run senators. And they're organized. They're organized and they're passionate. And you go to Versailles right there, and you know, which is the most famous Cuban restaurant, and people are arguing over politics there in the restaurant. You know, and the cops have to be called out. And you know, and us, I mean, honestly, from my opinion, I don't know what you think. You tell me if I'm wrong. We know what we see on TV, or so, but we're not. We still haven't really jumped in, right? And then I know
we argue all the time.
Yeah, we about
So someone would demonstrate it's that lack of patience. I mean, that's happening in the Democratic Party too. I mean, this is when you look at Texas. And the decision that has been made by Texas campaigns in the end, when you got that last ad buy and you need to decide where you're going to put all the money in the end, right, and where you're going to move this stuff to, it is not dropping into media outlets that speak to Latinos. It is dropping into this phantom persuadable voter that we think is out there, that we can, Republicans must have gone so crazy where they're going to vote for us this time. We're going to persuade them this time. No, we're not. No, we're not, right? We have to totally rethink the way we're doing this. And this is why, you know, we believe the base exists to win in Texas, base amount Democrats. We need to speak to the base. That means investing in creating channels to speak to the base. That means investing in, you know, speaking to, and what you put your money behind, that's what your real message is. So where you advertise, where you go, making sure that you're talking to, you know, Alfredo's here, making sure you're talking through La Voz to communities, making sure you're talking to Univision and Telemundo, and you're working through these media channels to speak to people, to reach out to people, and that you're putting a message that's going to excite and mobilize the base, not a message that is simply for this persuadable voter that we think is out there, but is actually not out there. But that takes so much investment. And you have to think the long game, because you're going to take losses doing this. But, you know, the way we think about it, I mean, at the state party is, they've been losing for a long time. It is time to respect who the base of the Democratic Party is and make sure that they are heard and make sure that they are invested in.
There was somebody over here. Somebody had a question. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, probably more of a comment. I'm boots on the ground, talking to people all the time. Whether it's time for elections or it's not, I'm always talking about it. at my church, in civic organizations. And Mexican Americans tell me the same thing all the time. It doesn't affect me one way or the other, which is wrong, because it does affect you, because your taxes go higher and you don't have representation, you don't have better streets, and your East Austin, East Austin is no longer the old East Austin that I grew up in, and that changes people. The things that I hear from Mexican Americans is, it doesn't matter, because the people that are making all the decisions, just looking at our last flood, talking to them last week, they don't have homes. They're sleeping on floors. They're sleeping with bed bugs. And I talk to them, do you vote? Do you vote? Well, I was registered to vote, or I was going to. Look, unless you really get involved, the people in the Capitol should be helping you. The governor should be making these decisions that you can have a house or that you have someplace to go. But if you don't do anything, they're never going to listen to you. And the people that you want at the Capitol or its city council, the only way you're going to do that is if you're part of it. And you have to be a part of it. I talk to a lot of people at my church, at civic events, like I said, but I just don't understand why Mexican Americans don't want to vote, or just feel like it's not, that their vote doesn't count. Now, on the other side, all the people that I know that are from Mexico and are immigrants can't wait to get citizenship.
Yeah.
Because they want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so how do we bring them both together, that we all are, whether it's Democrats or Republicans or independents or whatever. The most important thing is that we all have a voice, and when we don't all have a voice, it's just a very small amount of people that decide those decisions, that make those decisions.
Let me just say, if I could.
Yes.
One thing that we have to remember is that, because, in San Antonio, they'll say, well, you people don't vote, Here's the deal. Texas ranks last in voter participation. So it ain't only Mexicans, I hate to tell you.
No, it's not. It's not.
Everybody ain't voting. So the reason for that, one of the reasons, and I think especially for young people, is what you're seeing, the malaise you're seeing in the national level, which is they don't believe that these people at the federal or the state level are doing anything. So they've kind of given up on government. That's what they talk about, Trump and Carson. All that little group, they think they'd rather have an outsider that knows nothing about government. Maybe they'll be able to do something about government. I think what we're going through is people looking at our political institutions that are failing. And that's one of the reasons they don't want to participate. They don't want to vote. And I hear it all the time. ¿Pa qué? No se hace de todo, no se hace uno. Oh, ¿pa qué? They're not going to. And I think that one of the things that we have to do, a few things that we have to do is, one, re-engage the youth. When I was growing up, the kids in school would go sit at the city council chamber or at the commissioner court or at the state legislature. I don't see that happening a lot. There's rules about the schools having to register people as soon as they turn 18. How many of them do that? So we really have to get back to the young folks and modeling for them and including them and having leadership programs. I grew up in an era of Joe Bernal, Gonzalo. These were people that took young people like me at that time and said, there's a conference in Washington, I want you to be my representative. And sent 5 or 10 people to these conferences. What do you think that does for a 20-year-old in terms of, oh my God, I'm meeting Jesse Jackson, I'm meeting so-and-so. Incredible. I don't see that happening so much anymore. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think the Republicans do this thing of getting people ready for leadership better than we do it, young people. And I really think that that's one of the places that we're missing. I see it picking up more now, with this latest Democratic chair, but I think we really have to put more into those kinds of pathways to leadership, if you will, pathways to engagement.
I'd like to just say that I challenge everyone here and everyone that you know to become a registrar
Yeah.
and get people registered. Because once you give them the form and they sign it and either they mail it or give it back to you, they feel a little more empowered.
Would online registration assist that?
Maybe even online voting.
So-
text to register.
We're open for voting.
Oh, voting online. That's something I would.
I mean, I'll tell you what I did. So I used to reset a refugee, so they had the ceremonies. I was there with, I mean, it's always there, but I was grabbing people about 50 at a time, saying, if you want to be an American, this is your first requirement. And we registered like 1,000 people in one day at Burger Center.
You know, I mean,
Question.
I'll
One
get
of
you
the
both.
reasons, if you read the books after the election, 2008, 2012, books written by the campaign people for Obama, you'll see they focus a lot on the registration process in key states. And I'm from Virginia, although Nebraska came too, by the way. And I was part of the effort organizing and registering people. I used to go to the malls, I used to go to the markets, sit outside and register people. In Virginia alone, we registered 40,000 people. 40,000 people in Virginia, it means a lot. So the problem is that in Texas, I can tell you right now that the Hillary campaign is not going to spend much money here. It's a gone state. It's a red state for this coming year. So that's not good for Latinos because there's no effort to organize them and register. So one thing you can do is tell the Hillary campaign, Ms. Amanda Renteria, who's the political director, you gotta put money into Texas. Even though you might lose the state, it mobilizes the Latino community for long term. It's the long term.
Yeah.
By the way, I do want to come in for being here. I understand.
No, I feel like
No.
surrounded.
You're exactly right on the so one thing we've been taking a number of interviews on the past couple of weeks. We like to say Texas is the biggest prize in Super Tuesday. We have 252 delegates for the Democratic nomination in Texas, and if you add the 4 states that come before us, they amount to 186. So we have significant sway, and we expect our presidential candidates to come to Texas, to build organizations in Texas, to invest in Texas, and to build out their teams in Texas, and they got to earn that. They got to earn that vote
Because of the primaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've been pleased to see that Governor O'Malley was here just yesterday. Yeah, and Bernie Sanders has been in Houston and Dallas. I'm sure we're going to see him around soon again. Hillary Clinton has come around to San Antonio. I'm sure we're going to see them making multiple trips again and doing public events again. But they got to build organizations too. Bernie Sanders hired a Texas state director. Their team is already doing massive state tours to build out organizations. And they got to come, they got to compete, and they got to invest, and they got to build up so that it all feels like it's a presidential election for, you're combating in a state where civic society is broken, where there's low voter information. People are not engaged. We have to generate the feeling like this is a battleground state in order to do it. We got to keep on saying it and pushing it and pushing it. And the party, with what we could do, has invited everyone to do a Texas presidential forum. And Washington Post has written about this, and we haven't announced our media partners yet, but we're continuing to pressure the campaigns to make a Texas presidential forum here in Texas and have a nationwide broadcast on it, have a Spanish language broadcast on it, and use it to continue to organize, build parties all across the state, and engage and have a dialogue that moves beyond just that one event.
We've got about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to bring some more
I just want to
questions
make a
here.
quick comment. I'm one of those consistent voters, and so by the first day of early voting, nothing that I receive in the mail is useful because I've already decided a month before.
Yeah.
So it's wasted money. I really think that it should be targeted to non-voters. Or if you're going to target consistent voters, then ask them to do something for the campaign. Say, thank you for voting. Would you now help us by bringing other voters, with you or drive them or something? But I learned something at the political art panel earlier that we can all learn from. They talked about confianza, and they talked about creating ultimate trust through shared experiences. And so if the voter cannot identify with the shared experience that's in the ad, they probably will not be motivated. And so if you could just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you're developing your communication, is that shared experience is going to create trust, and trust is what's going to get people to do what you want them to do.
I think it boils down. What I learned from my side, I'm known as a person that doesn't toe the party line, and there are people that no, thank you. There are people that I will call out, but they still help me because of the relationships I have with them. And you begin to learn that a lot of it is just relationships in politics, and having a thick skin too. Because what I've seen is I've been in a microphone where I've been called names that you can read in the Wall Street Journal. They call me a wetback, but I know, playing sports before and play in business, that sometimes it's just cheap politics. If someone, can you imagine if someone just calls you a name and they expect you to go home?
Are you a masochist?
No, I'm a winner.
A couple of questions. I'll start with you, and then we'll go with you.
I think one of the things that wasn't mentioned on this panel that I was kind of disappointed is the pervasive influence of money in politics. That was not talked about. And if you talk to people that are voters, first of all, a lot of people, I'm from San Antonio, but I'm originally from the Valley, so I talk to all my relatives about why they don't vote. Most of them don't even know if they're registered or not. And when you ask them, or after conversing with them, you realize that they've gotten pretty jaded, and not just Mexican Americans. And they think, they feel like they know that the fix is in. That everybody is spending all this money, the people that spend the most money are the ones that are gonna win, so why should I go vote? I don't like them, I'm not gonna vote for them, and I don't trust the other guy, and, they just don't have confidence in government anymore. So to them, it's not really worth their time. And I don't think it's that they don't give a shit, like somebody said. It's because they don't think it's worth their time. And it's not worth it to, take time off from work or whatever to go vote when no one's gonna do anything anyway.
No, I
mean, that's the way they see it. And so and they know what's going on. They read about all the money that's being spent. All my family, they watch in Univision. They're up to date on all the issues, and they can discuss the issues with me in Spanish, but they know what the issues are, and they know what's happening, and they don't like it, but they feel powerless to change any of it. And I think that's what we have to.
No, I think you make a great point, and I think what was touched on here a moment ago is that's not exclusive to the Latino vote, right? I mean, we're seeing low voter turnout in every demographic. It's just here, it's a growing demographic that can have a huge influence there. Probably final question here.
And mine is more just a comment, and it's to everything you all have spoken here about today, as well as us in the audience. But the bigger question is, we know we're registering people. I work with the county tax office, and I'm a volunteer voter registrar. And so it's not just getting them registered, but that challenge, as we all know, of getting them to the polls. And so the lady here just spoke about, people don't think that the vote is effective, you're not making a change, or you no longer believe in the elected leaders or in the entire process. I'm the mother of one son, an 18-year-old, a newly registered voter. He pays attention to politics in a completely different landscape, which is this. So, he's not gonna watch a debate, or if he does, it's gonna be a snippet, right? But everything being technical and technology and how you're registering them and how we are engaging. So I look at those different processes as well. How are you engaging? But the big challenge is getting us re-energized and getting us back to the voting booth and getting us to believe that the vote really has the power. And so, I really personally try to focus on the millennials and kind of take charge that way. And I really like what Rosie said, that, you know, starting to tap into people who may not be those consistent voters. And don't dismiss that, because we have no idea what that could possibly open. I've done it within my own family. You know, not until 2008, I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, but it's the truth. I had a brother and sister who had never voted, but they voted in that election, and now they continue to vote and kind of feel empowered. And so, anyway, just thank you all again for being this tremendous panel.
And in fact, you know, right at 3 o'clock, you probably did a much better job than I would have thanking our panelists. But again, Mrs. Castro, we really appreciate it. Vincent, Tamo, Manny, it was always a pleasure to talk with you guys. Very knowledgeable. Thank you guys for being here as well and for your great questions and participation. And let's get people out to vote.